Hello everyone, welcome back to another tutorial video, and in today's video, drawing metal Beskar part 3, we're going to demonstrate how I did this part of Mando's helmet. We're going to go over how I used charcoal powder to create the foundational layer. We're going to go over how to create the metal texture. We're going to go over how to create that glare using charcoal white, and a few other things as well. And as you probably could have guessed, we're using the medium-sized soft makeup brush to apply that foundational layer of homemade charcoal powder to the page first before we do any texturizing or adding any detail to this. It's important to get this foundational layer down onto the page first. So to achieve an effect such as this, just be patient, keep applying more and more layers of charcoal powder, and just follow this step until it's even throughout. So now that I've achieved a relatively even blend of that charcoal powder in that section, I can go ahead and use my 6B General's charcoal pencil to create some of these dark lines, because it's important to do this afterwards, because I simply would have blended this section in if I would have done this part first. Another tip that I may not have explained to you guys before is how important it is to actually have this sheet of paper underneath my drawing hand, even though you can't see what I'm doing here on that section, but it's still important because you're going to help prevent the blending and smudging of that outline that you've already drawn. This is especially important if you're drawing with charcoal. That's going to blend and smudge very easily on the page. And what I'm doing here is I'm using the Faber-Castell Pit Oil Pencil Medium Softness to create a little bit of a darker layer on top of that charcoal that I've laid in this section prior to this. The reason I'm doing this is because this part is a little bit darker than the charcoal is allowing me to go, and I find that the pit oil based pencil goes just a little bit darker than the charcoal does. And this step that I'm doing right here also serves another purpose by smoothing out and blending in that charcoal layer just a little bit further to make it look ultra smooth and rich. You guys might want to try out messing around with this pit oil pencil and your charcoal drawings to see how these tools interact with each other. You might be very surprised at what different effects you're going to be able to achieve in your drawings. And another reason that I was using the pit oil pencil on the edge of that darker spot of the helmet is because the line right at the edge of the dark and lighter spot, right where I use the Tombow mono eraser to erase that line in, is very sharp. And when it comes to charcoal, it's not very good at making sharp lines. It's very difficult to get that pencil sharp enough, and even if it's sharp enough, it's not going to make that perfectly straight, really thin black line that you're going to be looking for. So in that case, I think it's really good to go on top of that with the pit oil pencil and create that really thin, ultra dark black line to separate the darker spot and the lighter spot of that helmet. And the step that I'm doing now is I'm using a more firm, harder, smaller art brush to apply a darker layer of charcoal powder to the page to fill in the rest of that section. So now with the thinner art brush, I can fill in some of these lighter spots more accurately than I was able to do before with that more medium-sized, softer brush from before. And because this brush is a lot harder and thinner, I can really blend in very closely to the edge of the darker and lighter sections of the helmet like I'm doing right here. And that line that I erased in earlier with the Tombow Mono Zero eraser was just a little bit too thick, I think. So I'm just blending it back over again with that brush and coming back in with a nicely sharpened edge of the Tombow Mono and making just that little bit thinner, more sharper line instead. And here is how I'm going to use the General's Charcoal White to create the glare effect. This step is quite easy as I'm just adding a thin layer of the white charcoal on top of the middle section and that outer section. And because we've been using charcoal powder and charcoal pencil throughout this whole step, the charcoal white layer goes extremely easily and very smoothly on top, and it allows me to create that glare that overlaps both sections of that helmet. If I was using graphite this whole time, I would be unable to use the General's Charcoal White on top. And again, we're just using the Faber-Castell Pit Oil pencil to really refine some of the darker versus lighter areas of this helmet. Because as I was saying earlier, the charcoal doesn't go quite as dark as the pit oil pencil does. Now you do have to watch out on what sections you're going to use this pit oil pencil, because the General's Charcoal White pencil isn't going to go on top of the pit oil pencil all that smoothly. Now for this section, we're doing the same step that we did at the start of the video. However, we're using the harder, thinner art brush to be able to more accurately fill this smaller space with charcoal powder, as opposed to using that larger brush that's actually going to probably accidentally blend in some of the other lines that we've already created. So we're using the smaller brush for this smaller section here. And again, it's important that we do this step here with the General's Charcoal 6B pencil after having done this previous step with the firm art brush, because had we done this first, we just would have blended this in a little bit first. So it's important to get that foundational layer down initially and then add these darker, more refined, more detailed, thinner lines with the charcoal pencil on top. And like I demonstrated earlier, I really like going in with the pit oil pencil after using the charcoal pencil anytime that I make these thinner lines like this, because I really find that it sharpens up that line, because the pencil can get sharper and it really does add that sharpness to the drawing by really refining the straightness of that edge of that line. And overall, I just find that adding this pit oil layer on top kind of just smooths out that layer of charcoal pencil. It kind of makes it look a little bit more rich, and it also serves to sort of blend it in a little bit. And now, as you can see, I'm filling in the rest of these lighter spots with that pit oil pencil, just to really finish it off, to really make it entirely nice and even and smooth. And because I did the charcoal layer to begin with, this goes on great on top. And again, blending these in together with a brush works actually really well. So pretty much what I'm doing is, after adding that foundational layer earlier, is I'm adding many more layers, whether it's with that pit oil pencil or with more charcoal powder, and then blending it all back in together, and then going back in adding a few more layers. And the reason I'm doing this is because this whole thing is a trial and error process, and much of what you see here I'm just kind of trying to figure out as I go, so I'm not always gonna get it in that first try, and probably neither are you. It's okay to go back in, add another layer, blend it back in, refine it a little bit. You might have to spend multiple layers and attempts to get one section a little bit more accurate to what you want it to be. And as you can see here, I'm going back in with the brush, adding more charcoal powder back in, just trying to get it as smooth as possible. And not just as smooth as possible, but really as even as a tone as possible. That's really that realistic effect that I'm going for. Is it can't look blotchy. It has to be perfectly the same tone, or as close to it as I possibly can get. Anyway, that concludes today's tutorial video. I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you guys learned a thing or two. But for now, I will see you guys in that next video. Peace.